Speaking of the spectrum, this is your host, Shahrukh Sultan, however you say it. I know who I am, you know who I am. And my co-host, this time I didn't say guest. I got it. Joe Templin, my very good friend, human Kaizen ninja, duck amok, and all those fun things. This is our season finale for season 1, which is bittersweet. I mean, we will be back for season 2. Rest assured.
Oh, and we're going to be better than ever because I'm going to update a couple of things. This is going to be sweet.
It's going to be sweet. And on today's episode, obviously, I want to start by thanking our sponsors. Pulse MD guys, thank you so much for your donation, getting us on air. We've reached places we didn't think we would reach in terms of the topics we've covered, but also who's listening to it all across the world. So thank you so much, everyone.
Hey, speaking of donations, this is a call out to the dozens or hundreds or thousands. I don't even know how many people have listened to this, but a lot of people. If you're getting value from this, please subscribe to the podcast so others can find it. But also, on our website, you can become a supporter. $5 a month, $10 a month, systematically. Make sure that we can continue to bring this content. And this is where I say, to viewers like you from like PBS, but a couple of bucks will help make sure that other people can benefit too. So if you can do that, if you've gotten value, if you've gotten a couple of laughs from Shahrukh and I, please consider doing that.
And it's easy. You go to our website, asghr.org/podcast. And A.S.G.H.R does not stand for Awesome Shahrukh getting higher results or ratings, right? It stands for Autism Society Greater Hudson Region, which both Joe and I are board members of. So there's a plug-in for that. But yeah, asghr.org/podcast. And at the very top, you will see a nice little donate button, and that'll take you to wherever you need to get to support us. So
but I'm going with Awesome Shahrukh from now on.
Awesome Shahrukh. Well, Awesome Shahrukh or Awesome Shahrukh. Let's see which one you can do. So, 10 episodes. We started a month or so ago. We didn't know which way this was going to go. I know it took us a year to get
sideways. Completely sideways.
Branched away instead of branching in, right? But the branching reminds me of like the what if game that you talked about in the very first episodes, right? How like when you plan as an autism parent going out with your kid, and what different scenarios can take place to prepare them for what's about to come, and it'll prevent a meltdown or at least reduce the chances. And the reason I bring this up is because one of the things I want to do on our finale today is talk about the best of, right? And one of the best, how I know the what if thing is the best of, because multiple people have sent us comments, notes, verbally have told me like, hey, Joe's Gems, which by the way, I'm trying to go viral, # Joe's Gems. Let's make it happen, folks.
Dude, I'm dropping so many gems. I'm like the Catwoman escaping from Batman.
Oh my God. I was going to say you're like a burglar trying to run away, but like Catwoman, sure, you want to go with that? Fine. Somehow your color scheme doesn't fit Catwoman's though. It's too bright for Catwoman. So, but yeah, so that's one of the big things that people have like come back is like, yeah, that what's it like? I wish I'd known about that, or I'm going to tell my relative who has an autistic child and that's been really benefiting them. So that was a really good one. And we're going to talk about more of the stuff through, but let's keep with the structure. We have a fact of the day today, Joe.
Yes. So the fact of the day is that we talked in the past a little bit about epigenetics, how autism appears to have a genetic component, but it can also be compounded or enhanced by choices in the environment. And you had mentioned in the past, like gluten, for some individuals on the spectrum can make the symptoms a little bit worse. Diet can play into that in other ways, but there's some new research that came on out, which I sent you the other day. We were talking about that BPA, the plastic that you find in cheap water bottles and things like that, can cause additional problems with it. And so one of the things you were talking about, how the fact that your son Sultan always needs the best food and, things like that. And it's not a crunchy granola thing saying, oh, we need to just drink from glass or from steel or things like that. It is plastic has gotten into the water supply. There's microbeads and there's all these other things. So just being aware of and trying to limit exposure around a lot of the really low-end components of that space.
So is this
will
just
help
like
protect.
is this plastics like playing with toys plastic, or is it like chewing a plastic? Or what kind of exposure are we talking about?
So, playing with it should be relatively benign,
Yeah.
but, all kids stick stuff in their mouth. Doesn't matter if they're neurotypical or, on the spectrum.
Sometimes I still chew on my pen.
Yeah, I still
Yeah.
chew on my pen too. So being able to mitigate that in a lot of ways. So the steel water bottles that you see a lot more of recently, those are something that goes a long way. And I think we got
Oh yeah.
a nice little example right
We'll
there.
get this one. I'm gonna humble brag on this one. It has our Autism Society logo and our sponsor Warren Tires who did this for us. So this bottle, we have a 5K event coming up, which is one of our Autism Society's flagship events. It's a 5K because Joe and I both were running. We talked about in an earlier episode how it became our event that we organize now every year, and it grows. And Warren Tires were kind enough to donate with this fantastic aluminum pre-filled bottle. It comes pre-filled with electrolyte infused water, so this is filled up. I know because I had to carry 20 cases of these in my garage for the order I got. But every runner who signs up for our 5K coming up on April 21st gets one of these. This is a $15 value, and it's yours if you run or walk the race with us. But yeah, aluminum bottles.
Yeah. And, I'm going to go and flash also because
boy.
I have the old style socks from previous races, which I absolutely love. That was my thing. But, the water bottle is actually much more functional and cooler because you can show it off everywhere.
But here's the nice thing: you can get both of these from our online store now. We have some socks left. We have a whole lot of bottles, and you can get them from our online store. So I'll drop the link of that in the description of this episode. So go check it out there.
This is like sort of like in Wayne's World where they've got like, the pizza and everything. They're, really leaning into being commercial shills. But, we are a not-for-profit business.
Yeah.
And if we don't earn revenue, we can't serve our community.
Yeah.
And we're now serving 21 different counties
in
throughout New York State. And with the increasing number of people being diagnosed on the spectrum, we need to do everything possible to multiply our reach, to be able to reach out and help as many people in our community as possible.
That's right. Be our ally, be our hero. That's why we named the races for you. Hero 5K for Autism. Go look it up. So plastics was a great note. When you watch what gets near our kids. What about a hero of the day?
So I'm going to go old school with these heroes because, we had Lumila on, she just released her book. Rodney does a bunch of writing. I'm a writer. So I was looking at autistic writers because their writing is a spectrum, very much like the spectrum is a spectrum.
Yeah.
And you've got people who write very technical type of things like I tend to. And everybody thinks that's where people on the spectrum would go, into the most hardcore components of law or research, or the fact that there are so many scientists who are on the spectrum, whether it's Einstein or Newton, that those components would be the most prevalent. And yes, there is some significant stuff there. But actually, if you look at other components of the writing universe, there are some incredibly innovative authors who are on the spectrum. So Lewis Carroll.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and people are like, how does somebody on the spectrum create like that? But it requires deep focus. It requires a different perspective on the world, a different understanding, a different logic path in a lot of ways to create a fictional world like Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. James Joyce, the brilliant Irish writer, he was on the spectrum. Virginia Woolf.
Wow, those are big names.
Emily Bronte.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of the Bronte sisters and all their writing and everything, but there is a huge number of individuals who absolutely adore that style of writing, that era of writing, essentially. So some of these incredible, world-changing writers are members of our community.
And that comes back to what we were talking about in the last episode, too, where just because you're non-speaking doesn't mean you're not verbal, right? So like with my son, although he can't talk, he's starting to learn how to type and tell us when he needs to go pee, or when he needs to go to the bathroom, or if he wants his iPad, or he's looking for his TV remote, he can type it on his iPad now.
Right.
So that doesn't. It's our first chance to like connect with him, see what's in his head, and who knows what else is there in the way he perceives the world, or any autistic kid who's non-speaking, right? Let's make that clarification here. Like, this is something I recently learned, is like non-speaking is not the end of the world. It's just that they're not verbal. There's a lot of communication they can do. Dr. Rodney talked about it in episode 3. We've been learning it on the journey of these 10 awesome episodes, that there's so much more in your child when you get that diagnosis. It's not your dream ending, it's a new dream starting.
And if they can type out what is in their head, they can communicate in a little bit different manner, and what they can create because of their different perception. I mean, your son might be the next Lewis Carroll.
Only hope.
Might be the next James Joyce. So with our special kids, giving them the means to grow into their superpower and grow into the person that they're going to be, and then express it, whether it is drawing, painting, typing, music, some other capacity, they can communicate in a different manner that ultimately is going to have an impact on the world.
Yep. And our job as parents is to find that, identify it, and then give them the room to grow with that. You know, and that goes for any parent, whether or not you're an autism parent or not, but like just in general. Like there's a big thing in the brown community. It's like, what do you want your son to be? Almost every parent's going to say, doctor, engineer, doctor, engineer, doctor, engineer. And the more I get older, I turn into my dad, and I'm like, they were right. There's a lot of value, but I always say, like, keep an eye on their special talents, the superpower, or whatever they really want to do for fun. I get you want them to have a career, to be financially stable. Yes, I'm all for that, right? But give them that thing that they really like to do and explore that, because that's what's really going to grow their personality, get them dynamic, and it works both ways, because like what you do for fun can impact your work, right? Like, I mean, running, like we do, puts us in a mental state where we can perform better at work, and our like focus at work increases with exercise. Or the more you focus on your hobby, it roots back. So for like neurodiverse people, I'm pretty sure that's the same way.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a physicist, I had a professor tell me that, studying poetry was a waste of my time.
Yeah.
And when I was a financial advisor, I was told that writing was a distraction. And what do I do now?
All of it. Everyday Excellence. Go look it up. Joe's #1 bestseller book. It's actually on my bedside. I read it. It's like, the way you've designed it is like you have a chapter for every day of the year, right? And it's not even just like any random day. It's like these particular date. Like if it's a springtime, it'll be something about the spring.
Right.
If it's winter, it'll be something about how to prepare for the winter, something like that. It's very helpful stuff.
Or like on Valentine's Day, there's a quote about love from Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right.
Who normally you don't equate those two things, but it made sense. And that book partially came out because of my neurodiversity of being ADHD. I wanted something that was 1 to 2 minutes. I wanted something very short, very succinct, that consistently you can consume and grow over time, because consistency is the key to excellence at long range. But being ADHD, I needed something short. So that's why I call it a multivitamin for life. It's literally 1 minute every single day to help make you better. And that's the sort of thing that our friends on the spectrum need, is that they need some of these short things, these establishing boundaries to play within, like I do with my ADHD, that allows them to be more successful. And you don't need to radically change the environment to make it more beneficial for them, which, as we've discussed throughout multiple podcasts, if we make things better for individuals on the spectrum, we make things better for everybody.
And we're just full of product placements today, aren't we? Like first with the bottles, and now Everyday Excellence. I'm going to drop a link of that
Wayne's
too.
World.
Wayne's World. Looking back at the 10 episodes, there are a lot of favorite moments, and there's a lot of feedback I've gotten from people who are following. One of the things that stuck out, so there's not many people who say anything that's not positive, but certainly I think sometimes things get taken out of context. And one of the things that someone on TikTok very verbally put out was in response to when you talked about how calm is contagious, right? When you were talking about it, it was in the context of autism parenting, right? Your child is having a meltdown. How do you react to calm them down? right? And that's where you talked about calm is contagious. You stay calm, your kid will stay calm. At least it'll get not escalate further, and get better, right? You're gonna try your best to do that. How it goes is a different story. But this one individual made a on TikTok. You can make a stitch. We just take that part of what you were saying and added their own part. Was talking about, well, that's not gonna work. He's like, if you have you ever been with somebody who's escalating, if you try to tell them I'm calm, it's gonna piss them off even more and more and more and more. And when I was watching it, I was like, he's right. He's absolutely right. It just doesn't apply in this situation, you know?
Yeah. So like Jocko Willink talked about energy matching, where if somebody's like, all hyped up, you have to meet them at that energy level. And once you meet them, you can guide them back down.
Yep.
But within the neurodiverse community, that is much more difficult because instead of having that matching and then calming where they'll follow your lead, it would create a feedback loop, which would then escalate.
Yep.
And so that's why it's a spectrum. Not everything applies to everybody. And we're trying to give people tools that they can use in the situation. And if everybody just has a hammer, then you're just going to hammer everything. But if you have more tools in the toolbox, you can say, no, let's try this one. Let's try this one. Let's try this one. And hopefully, ultimately, one of those multiple tools ends up being effective in that situation.
Yep. And you mentioned matching energies, and that kind of took me to another direction. Is in terms of feedback I've heard from people who've been enjoying the podcast a lot. Is the energy between you and me? They've actually said we have a really great candor, and we go back and forth really well, and it works out really well. And to that I say, you don't know how much more conversations we have outside of the podcast. I think Joe and I might want to start a separate one about just whatever else we talk about. But yeah, for that, you're just going to have to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. That's where all the exclusive content is, guys. Full of product placement today, right? I'm just like a salesperson today. Sales on the Spectrum is what today's episode should be called. What were some of your favorite moments, Joe, the last 9 or 10 episodes?
One of the things that I've really liked, and this is weird, but it's very much me, is that we'll have a conversation with somebody like Dr. Proslova, and she'll talk about making the workplace more environmentally friendly, less toxic for everybody, in reference to the Canary Code. And I was actually talking with Dr. Rodney Mogan this morning, texting back and forth, and he was talking about that particular episode, but also some of the things that he's gone through. So for people who don't remember, Rodney is 7'2", right?
Only
7'2". So it's easy to find him at conferences. I'll be over hanging out next to Rodney, but he would easily be able to in the workplace. They'd give him a big desk because of his height, but when he wanted the lights turned down, or if he was wearing headphones because of the overstimulation, because that's an invisible disability. He was considered to be rebellious or
too
needy, and but being able to close out the overstimulation and focus is something that everybody needs. So the open design that we talked about in terms of various schools or places can be overwhelming. And I was actually at RPI this week at the Career Center interacting with Phil Bryce and Laura Flynn and Pat Campanella from Advancement. And we were talking about how the environment's not set up really well. And so, hey, let's, put sound dividers here. Can we turn down the lights and everything? Yeah. And they had asked physical facilities if they could have dimmer lights, and they were told no. Why not? Well, because then everybody would want them, and everybody would want a sign, and everybody would want this. Well, what's so wrong about that?
Yeah.
Being able to know where you're going in the building is actually a good thing. Yeah. Being able to make the environment more conducive so that everybody can do better is a good idea. But we can't do that because we've never done it before.
So thinking all over again.
Yeah. And
we talked about this, yeah.
And, if you look, being able to have the dimmer lights would allow for greater productivity for everybody. It actually is an energy saving thing. So people are focused on that short term of we've always done this, making a change requires a lot of energy, but it saves a lot of energy and money and everything going forward. And so the net effect is better for not just the members of the community, but every member of the community.
Yeah. And that takes me to one of my favorite moments was when we talked about how the pandemic was almost like has its silver linings, right? A lot of these changes that we're seeing now, working from home, these different accommodations and stuff, are because the pandemic almost forced us to take a step back and look back and say, like, have we been doing things wrong this whole time? Like, the pandemic happened for some reason, right? How we've been doing things, what contributed to it? Can we be healthier? Can we use more masks? That was a whole debate. But all that politics and stuff aside, I think it made everybody introspective to some degree, and I think that's making it a little bit still challenging, but a little bit easier to like make apply change.
You just had a good word, intro, because a lot of people on the spectrum are introverted in a lot of ways, or they're just, non-verted. They don't care. But most of our organizations are led by extroverted individuals. Most of our groups are dominated by the person who speaks the most or the loudest or has the greatest tenure.
The squeaky
or the
wheels.
And it is the people who have the lower tolerance for people, the more introverted individuals who tend to be engineers also, that very often have the best ideas. And so allowing those people to have their voice and building organizations that are not just designed for the salesperson, the brash and bold, is going to actually allow organizations to tap into the people better. Yeah. Whether they're on the spectrum or not, whether they just tend to be quiet, whether they're from different communities that tend to be overlooked, whether it's people who just are afraid to speak up for whatever reason. If we can listen to those voices and amplify them so that we can properly balance the sound in the concert, essentially, we're going to have a much better overall experience.
Indeed. When you said word intro, that reminded me to the time when we talked about the fact of the day was the origin of the word autism, which my perspective or my reading that I got from when I first stumbled upon that fact that the word autism means alone, right? And the way I perceived it and the way I presented on the podcast was that it means that, it should serve as a reminder that, hey, your kid's not alone, or if you're autistic, you're not alone, right? It's like, it's more of a flag that, like, do your best to make sure this person doesn't live their journey on their own. But one of our listeners or viewers of the podcast actually left a comment, said, well, actually the correct interpretation, or at least their interpretation of this was it's self, right? Which you said intro. It's like it's the lens of the self, because they see things from their own unique lens. And that's what makes it a spectrum. That's what makes it so unique. And I agree that's a much better perspective than what I had in mind. But both outcomes are positive, right? But I just want to like go back to that moment and take that feedback also, which I truly appreciate. I'm never afraid of being wrong or being told like, hey, there's a different way to do that. That's really good. That's very healthy. So that to me was just in line with what you reminded me of, was like another moment or look back to some of the feedback we've gotten over the 10 episodes, was some of the things we say have different perspectives and they're all like very good. And this was like an eye opener for me too. Like, yeah, you're right. Like when I think of autism, I can't think of loneliness. It's just uniqueness, right? Or it's a self uniqueness, right?
And that leads to being able to look out through that person's eyes, to have that different perspective, which is one of the keys to empathy.
Yeah.
And if we can start operating from a greater empathetic point of view, not everything needs to come from my perspective as a white Irish Catholic guy.
Yeah.
Being able to look at it from a female perspective, or from, as you say, a brown perspective. And I can say that because I'm sitting here,
I don't mind.
Yeah. So don't try and come
Please,
after me with
pitchforks.
Okay. But being able to look at it from somebody else's perspective, that's the entire idea behind DEI, whether it is visible or invisible diversity. And that's how we can ultimately, having those different perspectives, see all the facets of the jewel.
Yeah.
And that's where the true beauty of things
And
lie.
that jewel is called the Jewel's Gem. See how that worked out? So speaking of like going into season 2, hopefully, and making things better, one of the things that I really hope happens is we get our friend Ryan Reynolds' attention, because we have named a whole section of our podcast after one of his movies that I really like. The Adam Project was a great time travel movie by, as you'd expect, a wacky time travel movie by Ryan Reynolds. But we keep bringing it up on this episode, on the show, because we use Adam to a project called Autism Dads and Moms, and where we give a tip or some kind of feedback we've gotten from people about how to be, you could apply towards autism parenting. But selfishly, we're trying, and I hope our engineer here will make a few seconds of a clip here. Like Ryan Reynolds, we have named a section after your movie, The Adam Project. If you catch wind of this and you don't want us to keep saying your name again and again, come in a Deadpool costume, send us a video or something, and serve us a cease and desist letter. We'll take it and we will stop. But
Or you can just send us a large check. We'll take that too.
that we will definitely take. But Adam Project for this podcast, Joe, do you have something?
So I used part of the Adam Project when I was talking about Rodney and the big desk and everything. But one of the things about being a parent, whether it's special needs or not, is the fact that our kids are going to grow. I've been listening to a lot of Ryan Holiday, Daily Dad, Daily Stoic, things like that. And so it's making me look at different approaches to how we interact with and assist our kids, because my oldest is now 19.
Well,
not a kid anymore.
yeah.
And when they were 13, 14, and we were starting to find out about them being on the spectrum and all that, it made me look back even further as to some of the things that could have been red flags, could have been, key indicators, stuff like that. And so with kids on the spectrum, their perspective of time is also different, leading to the Adam Project again.
Time travel.
So enjoy the moment with them. Yeah. This moment of, sitting on the couch while they're watching their iPad, or this moment of them playing with the Play-Doh or building the Legos or whatever, is not going to happen again.
Yeah.
And it's a very Zen thing in some ways, but if you can just be in that moment and enjoy it, they will feel that more, and it will help them if you can turn off the phone, if you can not worry about the work email or, what's happening tomorrow or any of this stuff, and just be present with them.
Yeah.
That's going to be more impactful for them, and you will remember those little moments more in the future.
That's beautiful, because I remember, like, obviously everyone loves The Office, right? And one of the things the character Andy Bernard says towards the end is he's like, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good times when you're living in the good times, not after that, right? And one of the things I was introspectively thinking about very recently was, so one of the outcomes from the pandemic was like we had to, find something to do as a family, there's nowhere to go. So we used to get in our minivan and just drive around town. And we used to do the same route over and over again. And we still do it. It's been years. We still do it in the evening. Sometimes we go for those drives. And it's really nothing. We're just sitting. Kids are sometimes on their iPads. This is the time my wife and I get to talk to each other. Or we're just driving, picking up fast food, whatever. It's a nothing drive. But one day I suddenly realized, like, there's going to come a time where one of those drives is going to be our last ones together. Like, or we're not going to, who knows, right? So even as boring as it sounds, even it's like in Albany Central Avenue, which is not the fanciest city in the world, right? Even though it's nothing like glamorous, it's us. It's our time together. It's a way to connect, and it keeps my kid calm. He likes the car. We're all together in one space, and that's a beautiful thing, even in its nothingness or just blandness, right? Much like The Office, which is like a bland,
or Seinfeld. And
or Seinfeld, yeah.
Seinfeld, who is on the spectrum, as we've talked about, says, enjoy that garbage time.
Yeah.
Okay, that time that you might think is wasted, it's useless, right? That garbage time. But one man's trash is no man's treasure. Your kids will remember those moments, and those moments become the most valuable thing to them. And that's another Joe's Gem.
That is a fantastic Joe's Gem, and I'm actually going to end with that because I hope you all have enjoyed our trash for the last 10 episodes. We'll be back with season 2. Before I go, thank you again to Paul Cindy. I also want to thank our engineer here, Tyler. Tyler, I know you don't have a microphone. Can you just say hi loud enough so everyone can hear us?
Hi, everybody.
There he is. Tyler has been fantastically producing all of this for us in the background. I wanted to give him and JGI Studios a shout out. But yeah, this has been Speaking of the Spectrum Season 1. We'll be back with Season 2 before you know it. But until then, like and subscribe to our Instagram, TikTok, YouTube channels. There'll be exclusive content still coming. We may not be recording, but we'll be speaking of the spectrum all the time. So we'll speak soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.